This fall has just felt like it's speeding by, and today I'm dedicating the afternoon to getting a few things done in the kitchen that have been on my to-do list and doing a little bit of fall cooking. I'm starting out today with getting a big batch of chicken bone broth going. We always have a ton of bones in the freezer. We raise our own meat birds, and with that, we always have the whole bird and we have those bones to use up. Now, typically I will just make the broth as I'm cooking a whole chicken, but on occasion, if we don't need that broth, those bones will just go right into the freezer to use at a later time. So I had a few carcasses that needed to be used up. I'm planning a fall-inspired soup that I'm going to be making later today, so I thought this was the perfect opportunity to get a bunch of broth made so I can use that fresh in my soup. These bones are from a few roasted chickens that we had, and typically I'll keep some veggie scraps in the freezer and use those in broth, but I didn't have any on hand, so I'm just adding in a couple carrots from the garden, a little bit of yellow onion, along with some garlic. I did end up adding in some dehydrated celery that I have as well, but something that I really like to do throughout the garden season is dehydrate celery leaves because we don't typically use them in cooking, but they do have a lot of flavor, so those are great to add into broth. I'm also getting going on my basic sourdough loaf recipe. This recipe is super easy, super forgiving. Sometimes I feel like people overcomplicate sourdough, but I find it to be pretty forgiving. So I have a large bowl that I've just added a little bit of warm water into. I like to use warm water in the cooler months just because it helps to speed up the fermentation process. And I'm adding in some of my sourdough starter. Now, again, I find that sourdough is more flexible than people make it out to be. So you can, in this recipe, use either active or sourdough discard. Both work. If you do end up using sourdough discard, you'll just end up needing to have a little bit more rise time with it. For this bread recipe, I like to add in a little bit of honey and a little bit of olive oil as well as some salt, and I'll get that all mixed together before stirring in the flour. For flour, I typically will just use organic all-purpose unbleached flour and just get that mixed together. You're going to want to form a shaggy dough. Doesn't need to be fully incorporated, and everything's going to get mixed together as I end up doing stretch and folds throughout the day. So for stretch and folds, I will typically let the dough rest for about 30 to 45 minutes, sometimes an hour, and then I'll do about 4 sets of stretch and folds spaced that far apart over the next couple hours, and you'll see throughout that time that the consistency of the dough really starts to change. So I'm just giving that a cover and allowing that to sit aside while I get started on some other things. I was due to restock on some of my all-purpose cleaner. I have got a few different recipes for this, and this is what I use on most surfaces in our home. So this one, I'm doing a mixture of isopropyl or rubbing alcohol and water, and it's effective, it's affordable to make, and it is completely non-toxic if you're trying to use cleaner products in your home. And the other thing I love about making my own cleaners is I can scent them with some essential oils, and I can kind of change up the scent a little bit depending on the time of year. So I'm doing this batch with some cinnamon and orange essential oil for something that is very fitting for this season. These are super easy to make, and the nice thing about it is the ingredients that are required are super simple, things that you probably already have on hand, so it's easy to whip up whenever you run out. Something that I am very passionate about is natural living. This has been very important to me for well over a decade, and it played a huge role in us deciding to live where we do, and also the way that we do, with us growing and raising as much food as we can. Naturally, this also stems into the products that we use on our bodies and in our home, and I have been known to be pretty strict about what comes into our home to make sure that we're keeping it a healthy environment. Something that is really easy to overlook when you're trying to create a healthier home is your sleep space. But we spend about a third of our lives sleeping, so of course that is a massive amount of time, and it was really important to me when looking for a mattress to find something that was free of harmful materials. Most mattresses are filled with fiberglass and polyurethane foams, which can lead to harmful off-gassing, as well as many other toxic materials. What I absolutely love about Birch Living is that they use high quality materials like natural wool, organic cotton, and organic latex to produce mattresses and other sleep products that I don't need to worry about negatively impacting our health, and that is all backed up with the Green Guard Gold certification. With the use of these materials, Birch Natural mattresses are very breathable, and they're also great for temperature regulation, which I love because my husband is a walking furnace, so that is an important feature in a mattress for us. We have been absolutely loving our Birch Living Luxe mattress. It somehow manages to be very supportive, but still nice and plush. And I have found since we've made that switch, I'm not only sleeping through the night, but because of that, I'm waking up feeling more rested. Birch Living is currently running their Black Friday sale, and you can use my link and exclusive partner offer to save 27% on your new mattress and have it delivered straight to your door. I'll have my link in the description box down below so that you can check out Birch Living and take advantage of this amazing sale and create a healthier sleep space today. I have also been due to make another batch of my tallow balm. I've shared a video of this here on my channel before. It is super easy to make and much more affordable than some of the brands that you can buy in store. If you want it to be super affordable, definitely render your own tallow. But even if you were to buy rendered tallow from the store, it's going to be much more affordable for you to make it than to buy pre-made tallow balm. It's also super easy to do. Only a couple ingredients are needed. You're going to need tallow, of course, which I'm just getting melting in a small pot, and then some oil of your choice. I like to use olive oil, but there are a variety of oils that you can use in place of that, depending on your skin type or what you're looking for. After the tallow is melted, I stir together that tallow with the olive oil and then set that aside to chill. At this point, it was time for my last set of stretch and folds, and I'm starting on dinner for this evening. I saw somewhere the idea of a butternut squash lasagna soup, and I'm not sure exactly where I saw the recipe, but it sounded like a great idea. So I took that idea and kind of ran with it, and this turned out so delicious. It's definitely something that we're going to be making throughout the cooler months. So I'm just using a whole butternut squash and removing the seeds after I've got that cut in half. And I like to give that a little bit of olive oil and salt, and then it gets transferred into the oven to roast. For this soup, I wanted lots of that roasted garlic flavor, so I'm just crushing some whole garlic cloves. Typically, if I had a full head, I would just trim off the top of it, but I had a bunch of cloves loose, so I'm just crushing that. And you can add this to either a piece of foil, or what I'm using is just a ramekin with a lid, and covering that in a little bit of olive oil, some salt, and that's going to roast in the oven with the butternut squash until it's nice and golden. Typically when I'm making my tallow balm, I will do a really large batch. I'm doing quite a bit smaller of a batch than I typically do today. So when I'm doing a larger batch, I like to use my stand mixer with the whisk attachment. I find that that works really well to get that light, fluffy texture. But today I'm just using my handheld mixer and that works really well. I always get questions about how long this will last, and I would say on the conservative end, at least 6 months, but I have had tallow balm stay perfectly fine in a cool, dark spot for over a year. Of course, you just want to make sure that you're not introducing water or any bacteria into it. This makes a wonderful, really light and fluffy moisturizer, and one of the reasons that tallow balm is so popular is because the fatty acid profile is very similar to our skin's natural oils, so it ends up being a really effective moisturizer. This soup is going to be very simple. After I've removed that butternut squash from the oven, I'm allowing that to cool a little bit so that it's easy to handle. And while that's cooling, I'm getting started on my onion. So I'm just using yellow onion for this recipe and getting that diced up. And then to a Dutch oven, I'm adding a little bit of olive oil. And at this point, you could use ground beef if you preferred. You could use sausage. I am kind of making my own sausage using some of our ground pork from the pigs that we raised last year and seasoning it with a bunch of different herbs and spices. For seasonings, I'm using some ground sage, of course, some smoked paprika. I like to do a good amount of chili flakes for some heat, but you can also leave that out if you're not into spice, as well as some dried parsley. I also do a little bit of fresh black pepper and, of course, some salt. I'm just allowing that to cook until it is mostly cooked through, and then adding in the onions so they can soften as that pork finishes cooking. At this point, the broth was ready to strain, which is perfect timing because I'm going to need quite a bit of it for this soup. And I wanted the base of the soup with the butternut squash to be really smooth. So I am just scooping that out of the skin, adding it to a quart-sized mason jar. I'm doing this in batches with that roasted garlic, just pressing the garlic out of the skins, and I'm adding a little bit of broth in there so it's easy to blend up with an immersion blender. Just watching this, I'm thinking of how much I need to make this again very, very soon. So to that pork mixture, adding in a bunch of that broth that we made, along with the butternut squash puree. Once I have that up to a simmer, I'm adding in my noodles. Now, with this being a lasagna soup, you would typically add lasagna noodles, but I have these mafalda noodles, which are kind of like mini lasagna noodles, and I thought that that would be perfect to use in this soup. So I'm adding those in, and for a little bit more veggies in this dish, I'm adding some of my dehydrated kale from the garden last year, but you could absolutely just substitute in frozen or fresh when you're adding in those onions to saute. This soup turned out wonderful. Now, my plan was to serve this with a scoop of ricotta cheese on top. However, I realized that I did not actually have any in the fridge like I had thought. So that would of course make this creamy, but you could stir in a little bit of cream to the base of the soup if you wanted. We just served this with some freshly grated parm on top, and this turned out very, very good. Even my husband, who is not a huge squash fan, ended up loving this. With this cooler weather, it is of course taking my sourdough longer to rise. I wanted to make this loaf into a cheese swirl sourdough, so I just flattened out that dough, sprinkled on some shredded cheddar cheese, and then shaped it and added that into my loaf pan for the second rise. At this point in the day, it was a little bit late for me to wait for it to rise and be able to bake it. So this went into the fridge, and that's the other great thing about this recipe. And most sourdough is you can just cover it, put it into the fridge, and leave it for a long ferment. You're going to get even more of those sourdough benefits, and that way you can just bake it once it's ready. Thank you so much for joining me today for a little bit of fall cooking, and as I restocked on some of our most used personal care and cleaning products. I'll see you in the next video.